But it's going to pick up. It's getting better soon.
Good afternoon. Welcome everybody here. Whether you're a guest or a member, whatever reason you came.
Hold the mic closer to you.
Whatever reason you came, welcome to the East Temple Hill Rotary Club. And I think we're having a good program today, and we'll see what happens. I'm going to for our moment of humility, I'm going to read something to you. It's an old Irish hymn that has English words to it. Be thou my vision, O Lord of my heart. Naught be all else to me, save that thou art. Thou my best thought by day or by night. Waking or sleeping, thy presence my life. Be thou my wisdom, and thou my true word. I ever with thee, and thou with me, Lord. Thou my great Father, I thy true Son, thou in me dwelling, and I with thee one. So I think we may have some guests, but are there any?
Keep the mic close to you.
Are there any visiting Rotarians? Any visiting Rotarians in the room?
Right here.
Okay.
Marie Howard, the Rotary Club of Oxford. Yeah.
And we'll do some visitors. I know we have at least one visitor up here in the front.
My visitor is my husband, Andy Sisson.
We got one over here too. We got my dad in town from Buffalo, New York, Don Gilbert. You heard the transfer portal was opening up. Keeper might have a spot. Played a little point guard back in the 60s, so we're gonna see what we can work out with getting him in the portal.
I've got one suitcase.
Okay.
It's up.
I have Kaiser Quo who kindly came back again.
All right. My name's Keith Wolf. I've been in the club a little over 2 years, and I've enjoyed every meeting I came to. It's one of my high points of the week. So I'm glad you guys let me in. I transferred from another club in Albemarle, North Carolina. And I know all of y'all have had in your life some lucky times and some unlucky times. And so that's just part of life. But I want to tell you about 3 times when something happened to me that was just completely unexpected and good. So when I started school, I had a hard time reading. I think I had dyslexia, but they didn't use that word back then. I didn't know the difference between what, when, where, what, why, all that stuff. And I had a hard time spelling, so I was really having a rough time. I had to go to summer school after my 2nd grade to help with my reading. So nobody had any high expectations of me other than my parents at that point. So in the 6th grade, we had this big test. And it was an IQ test or a placement test or something. And you read all the stuff and you put the answers in the columns. I think there was 8 columns. And so multiple choice. So I'm reading, I'm doing this stuff. I get to the end and there's still questions, but the columns are full. So I look back and there's a column I missed. So it's getting near the end of the test, so I had to start going, get one column and put it in the blank column and then erase that column and then go backwards. So I was doing that, and then they called time, and I think I had one blank column and one full column of random answers. I was not, I was not happy with it, but at that point, I didn't want to take that test again. I don't even think I told the teacher anything about it. So it just went on, 6th grade. So when I got to the 7th grade, they put me in the advanced classes. So apparently the random answers were as good as the answers. And after that, I started making better grades, and people say, hey, you got something going on. And by the time I got to high school, I was the 3rd person in the grade with, in the senior class with grades, so I missed valedictorian by 2. So I turned things around, and I felt really good, and I don't know how that happened. That test was just amazing. So skip ahead to the late 1990s. I had my 2 children at the beach, at Sunset Beach, and they liked to ride the raft in. So I would go out there with them and get them on the raft, and they were like elementary. And so I get them going, get them a good wave going in. We're having a big time. I come out of the water, and I realized that my key to the house was gone. And I had read that you can get another key, but you got to go to the realty and tell them how stupid you were, and pay them about $30, and they'll give you another key. So my wife had another key to get in. We ate lunch. I went over there to the realty. I was in there explaining that I had lost the key. This guy walks in the door and said, I just found one of your keys. I caught it off the pier. It was my keys. So that was completely unexpected. And I guess my 3rd really unexpected thing was I was moving here 2.5 years ago, and we were looking for a place. We had a list of about 10 things we just wanted in the house. We really we were downsizing a little bit from what we had, get all on one level. And at that time, housing was just going crazy. You'd see a house that was up for sale, and then within a week it was pending. So we're looking at houses, the ones we kind of like, they're pending. The ones we looked at a lot of houses, they just didn't match what we're looking for. So one Saturday night, my wife saw on Realtor.com there's a house for sale. It looked like what we wanted. So we called our buyer's agent who's been helping look for stuff and said, we want to see this house as soon as possible. So we got to see it on Monday, and we went in, and it was everything we wanted, everything on our list. It had, and it was better than what I would have expected. And so the issue was going to be the cost. So we were thinking about the cost, and we talked to the buyer's agent, and he said it was a little more than what we were thinking about. And I said, you think we can make a lower offer, and maybe they'll take that? And then she said, well, I'm going to tell you the truth about this. The lady that's selling the house is a realtor. She's selling her parents' house, and for some reason, she's got it listed at tax value. And so we said, well, and I said, she said, what you should do is make an offer and make it contingent of 48 hours, and we'll pay this for it. And hopefully they'll take it before somebody else makes an offer. So that's what happened. So we got our house for tax value, and then about 6 months later they reappraised the house, and it went up $140,000. So we argued about that. So we just bought this house. It was on the open market. We bought it for this. You shouldn't go up $140,000 because this is what we paid for the house. And they said, they thought about it and said, okay, we'll just raise it $4,000. So that's the most unexpected thing that's ever happened to me. So I'm very happy with all of those. And I'm going to pass this fine basket around, and if you'll put at least $1 in it, I appreciate it. And I think it's time for me to let the president take over. But I don't want to get carried away. I got some crazy stories, but I'll save that for another
Thank you, Keith. Today, the fine basket, we have our former district governor, Marie Howard, with us. And she's going to tell you a little bit about Rotary Foundation. She's also may tell you a little bit about the new online club she's starting. But their club, she was telling me, is doing a fundraiser for deaf children, school for deaf children down in Jamaica. So the fine basket today, all the proceeds from the fine basket will go to support her in her efforts in her school. So please be generous with your donations today.
Thank you. Speaking of unexpected, thank you.
Keith, thank you. That was Keith's first time up here. Sergeant at Arms did a wonderful job. What Keith did not tell you is, he did tell you that he's from Albemarle. He did tell you that he was third in his class. What he did not tell you is that his graduating class was 5 people. So some things are not always as they appear. Okay. We received a letter recently that Peggy passed on to me. We made a foundation, made a $500 donation to the Two Mules Haiti Benefit Project, and they sent us a thank you letter. So, Peggy, thanks for your involvement in that. Let's give Peggy a big round of applause for her involvement. Very nice thank you. Quick reminder, there is no meeting next week. Okay, it's Memorial Day weekend. You can meet, but we will not be here. I'd like to bring Joe Jenkins up. He has an announcement he'd like to make.
Thank you, Mark. Some of you may realize that we recently received recognition for 10 years of service to the Sekou House family, serving them. And we were there last night, and it was wonderful. Big crowd. They're finally filling up the remodeling that they did. And now they're beginning to see the crowd. And there was everybody who was there last night, please stand up. Welcome, and you can get food over there. So thank y'all. But I have to say that, and Bill Boland stood up, I have to say that the most prized possession is Diane Smith's cobbler. And she set some aside for Bill Boland last night. And the good thing about mental incapacity is that you forget. And I was the last one out. And lo and behold, what did I discover? But Diane Smith's cobbler, which was really good, Bill. Thank you very much. All right, we've got to apply the four-way test about the award we got for 10 years of service to the Sekou House, okay? So let's do it in reverse. Was it beneficial to all? Well, I think we all feel better about it, right? So it was beneficial to all. Did it build friendships, better friendships, and goodwill? Yeah, it did. Was it fair to all? Gosh, it was. Was it? No word from Mr. Wood. Yes. Was it the truth? Well, here it gets a little tricky. So the Sekou House reached out and said, "Oh, we want to give you all an award for serving 10 years." So what would I do as a novice, not knowing? I go to the honorable and eminent Mr. Woodruff. Now, some would say he has a conflict of interest because of the Woodruff Warriors. So he's very proud of them, very proud of them. And so, of course, I asked him, as an honorable person, had we served for 10 years? And of course, he knowing they were going to get an award, said, hell no. So lo and behold, I had to lie to the people at Sekou House in order for us to get the award. So, of course, I did. So the answer to the final four-way test is it the truth? No. But we accepted it, and they were so appreciative, I think, just of what we do and what all of you do. And I thank all of y'all for participating. Thank you.
Bob, you have something you want to say?
She was our actual 10-year award.
Mike Clayton, many of us attended his father Pete's service yesterday. It was great to see so many people, so many Rotarians out there, along with so many community members from Roxborough. Mike had said to me that he wanted to say something today. Mike, you want to?
I'd just like to tell everybody thank you for my family. You guys are tremendous. The outpouring of affection was just really heartfelt. We appreciate it greatly. My mom says she can't do it all. Y'all gave me down to do a little bit. I sure appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Now I'm going to pass the mic very briefly to Marie, who has an announcement and an award to present.
Thank you, Omar. I am so pleased to be a Rotarian today and to be in this club. Y'all make me happy to be a Rotarian. What a great and wonderful club this is. I was past district governor. I served as governor from 2019 to 2020 during the COVID days. So it's great to be back in person. And now I am serving the district as District Rotary Foundation Chair. So today I am here on behalf of the foundation and to give a special award. And as a preface, I'd like to answer the question, why give to the Rotary Foundation? More particularly, why give to the foundation when the club has a foundation? Like most Rotarians, I believe service to others enriches our lives. It is our obligation. And to quote Shirley Chisholm, service is the rent you pay for room on this earth. I believe that we are expected to give generously, reflecting our personal good fortune. And as President John F. Kennedy said, to those who much is given, much is expected. I believe that choosing the Rotary Foundation for my philanthropic gifts is a wise decision. Independent evaluator, Charity Navigator, has given the Rotary Foundation a 4-star rating, their highest rating, for 14 consecutive years. I believe in supporting projects close to home. Donating to the foundation's annual fund share assures that half of my donations will be returned to the district to support projects endorsed by our local district Rotarians. But I also believe that there are humanitarian needs of which I am not aware, but those needs are understood by other Rotarians. I'm also happy that half of my gift to annual fund share goes to the World Fund to address the needs of those around the globe. So in summary, I believe that donations to the annual fund share of the Rotary Foundation is perhaps the most effective use of my charitable gifts, addressing needs both close to home and around the world. And so today, I have the honor to honor a couple who have given very generously and whose lives have exemplified service, serving as diplomats around the world. Please come on up. Karen Levine and her husband, Andy Sisson, who have generously contributed to the Rotary Foundation and through their contributions have achieved major donor status. And to become a major donor, you probably have to talk to your spouse because it's $10,000 or more in cold, hard cash. And they have achieved that. So, I'm gonna let you hold this, and I'm gonna do the pinning. And they each get a gift because again, you have to talk to each other if you're gonna give 10 grand to somebody. And it has a little fake diamond. Darn.
Thank you, sir. Go ahead.
So thank you both for your generous support. Thank you. Well, if I can get it together here.
Can I just have a big round of applause, please?
Just wanted to say, we started giving to the Rotary Foundation during my first club in Malawi in the mid-1990s, when we found out about a program called Books for Africa, in which you could get free books as long as you could pay the cost of shipping. And we managed to get enough sets of Encyclopedia Britannica, because we didn't have the internet then, for every high school in Malawi. And then we did it at very little cost to the club because of what was then the matching system. And so it was a huge achievement. It was something, they didn't have anything like that. So that's when we started giving.
So 50,000 books, all the high schools, a lot of others, and the Rotarians in Malawi were spectacular because they had all the connections around the country and got the books out. I wanted to talk just for a sec about a different connection with the Rotary Foundation, which you all should be really proud of, which is the Rotary Peace Fellows. Rotary Foundation supports 7 peace centers worldwide, I think you know this, and the only one in the United States is jointly run by UNC and Duke. And Karen and I have had the privilege to sponsor a fellow who's spoken here at the club from Central African Republic, and we're now sponsoring a new fellow coming in. And as a teacher at Duke and UNC, I've had students who are Rotary Fellows, master students at both schools. They are extraordinary people, not just students, but amazing, brave, brilliant leaders from their countries. Starting NGOs, serving as emergency room doctors in a war zone, doing brilliant research. These people are already making a difference. And when they come home after UNC or Duke, they are going to be really powerful leaders that you all should be. And I'm very proud to have a small connection with. Real privilege.
One real quick reminder, Mike Clayton's induction ceremony will be June 22nd, okay? There will be a sign up coming up shortly for that. As I said last week, it is free. It is included in your dues, so please attend. It's a lot of fun.
There will be dessert.
There will be dessert. Without further ado, Jim, I'd like you to come up. Please introduce our speaker.
Well, I was going to have some fun over whether it was the climate on the campus or the climate on the planet, because there's widespread agreement on those, but we don't have time. So please welcome Dean Jim White. If you want to read about him, it's in the bio. Come on up, Dean.
Thank you so much. My picture over here. I am impressed because I've spoken at Rotary clubs. I started speaking in public about climate change and sustainability about 30 years ago. And I've spoken to a lot of Rotary clubs, mostly in Colorado, beginning to speak at Rotary clubs here. I spoke in Mount Airy recently. They invited me, very kindly invited me. I also got, my wife and I got to ride around in the back of the Mayberry squad car. That did not happen here, and I got to talk to Jim about it. You need a squad car. Anyway, I wanted to, so first of all, thank you for inviting me. Thank you for lunch. And thank you for all that you do. I've learned about Rotary over the years. My wife is a Paul Harris Fellow. I'm very impressed, always been very impressed with what Rotarians have accomplished in our, frankly, very troubled world. So, I had a couple options of what to speak about. I could speak about the goings-on at the University of North Carolina. Happy to talk about that later. My phone is buzzing off the hook now with a bunch of stuff. But I did want to talk to you today about my research, the work that I've been doing for a long time on the issue of climate change. Obviously, we're not going to cover everything, but I just want to give you sort of some of the highlights of things that I think people should know, and things that people don't think about, and we don't hear so much about in the newspapers. So let me set the stage. If you don't know, human beings are the primary agents of change on the planet today, and there's all sorts of metrics we can use for that. We make more fertilizer than all the bacteria on land. We move 10 times more dirt than tectonics and mountain building does. We use many resources faster than they're created. Fossil fuels is one of those, but also phosphorus, which we need to grow plants. We're watching that very carefully. We actually use all of the fresh water, more than all of the fresh water that falls on the continental United States. It gets recycled. And I'll let you ponder that right after lunch here. All basic needs that we have, food, water, energy, etc., have environmental impacts. And so the question I get asked a lot is, can we live on this planet without a footprint? And the answer is no. And there's too many of us. We have too high of a standard of living in order for that to happen. The real question is, how do we manage that footprint? And what are we going to do to manage it effectively and sustainably so that our kids and grandkids, etc., can have the same kind of lifestyle we have? How do we get here? Two very basic things have happened. One is there's more of us. On the left here, you see a graph of population. You've probably seen this before, but we really, this is the power of the exponential that we kind of forced you to learn about back in high school and college. And it really is very powerful. At some point, it takes off, and it's really not much. And the change happens so quickly. So we went from 1 billion, literally not that long ago, to almost 8 billion today. And so that the more of us there are, the more demands we have are, the more energy we need, the more water we need, the more resources we need, etc. The other is, it's actually a bigger issue, and that's a standard of living. Now, we have a wonderful standard of living, but the amount of energy, and what you see here on the left is the energy use in tons of oil equivalent per capita versus the GDP per capita. In order to have the kind of lifestyle that we have, we need energy to do that. That's absolutely true. There's no getting around it. Right? So, as it turns out, we know that in this country that we have a very high standard of living, one of the highest standards of living. If you look at where the rest of the world is, they have a significantly lower standard of living. That red bar you see across is world average. But the change here is important to recognize. So, for example, if those folks in China, the billion plus, want to have the same kind of lifestyle that they have in, say, Japan or Australia, it's not a question of, say, 10, 20% increase. It's a question of doubling or tripling the amount of energy that they would need in order to have that standard of living. So the real multiplier, the real big multipliers is standard of living. And that's something that I want people to understand. Now, it does make a big difference. If there's more of us, and more of us having a higher standard of living, then that's more energy consumed, more water consumed, more, etc. But keep in mind and I used to ask my classes, do you begrudge the folks in South America having the same kind of lifestyle that we have? And thank goodness the universal answer that comes back is no. But then we talk about the challenge. How are we going to provide the energy, the water, etc., to make that happen? And it's a really excellent opportunity for them to understand how the world works. What you should know about physics and free will. Right? This sustainability is really an issue of humans in the environment. We live on a planet that has very fixed rules. I can, pick up this fork and I can drop it, and I can do that all day, and I can do that all night, and keep going. It will never stop halfway down. It'll never stop halfway down because gravity is gravity is gravity, right? That's a very simple physical principle. It doesn't change. you live on a planet that has very strongly fixed rules. We happen to be a creature that dominates the planet that doesn't like rules. We don't. All right, I'll give you a little example of that. All right, I assume everyone in this room has driven a car. Is that right? How many of you have ever come to a stop sign and not come to a complete stop? That's against the law. Right? That's a minor law breaking, but we also know there's major law. We are a creature that enjoys our free will. We enjoy what we do. And yet you live on a planet that says, nope, you got to obey the rules. And therein lies a really interesting issue when it comes to sustainability of human beings. I'm not going to talk any more about that, but I invite you to think about that. Because that, to me, is really the crux of the future, the crux of sustainability. All right. How does global climate work? Another question I get asked all the time is, all right, climate's very complex. Is it predictable? Do we know what's going to happen? So I want to back up to global climate. That is the entire Earth. Because it turns out that at the global scale, it's pretty darn simple. There's only 3 things you need to know to actually calculate the average temperature of our planet. And it was calculated more than 100 years ago. But those 3 things you need to know are how much energy we get from the sun. All right, the sun is our energy source. We have very little energy coming out of the ground. If we didn't have a sun, we'd be very, very, very cold, dead thing, right? So how much energy we get from the sun? Second, how much of that energy is reflected? So if you live on a world that is covered with clouds or covered with ice, a lot of that sunlight gets reflected and the planet doesn't heat up. So the reflectivity is the second thing you need to know. The third thing you know is the amount of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. Greenhouse gases are special because they're gases that absorb the Earth's energy, not the sun's energy, the Earth's energy. So the sun comes down, warms the ground up, the Earth radiates energy into outer space, and if there's anything in the atmosphere that grabs a hold of that energy for any length of time, that's a greenhouse gas, and that'll increase the energy in the atmosphere. And climate, by definition, is the amount of energy in the atmosphere. So we live on a planet that has several very prominent greenhouse gases, the most prominent of which is water. So water vapor is a greenhouse gas. CO2 is a greenhouse gas, methane, etc. Right? So those are the gases that trap the Earth's energy and increase the amount of energy in the atmosphere, and increase the temperature as well. Right? If you're wondering why the opera singer has to do with molecular vibrations, then I don't want to talk about that. So greenhouse gases are a natural and important part of the climate system. Another thing we don't talk about. The Earth's temperature can be calculated, just the amount of sun and the reflectivity, without greenhouse gases. Or we can put satellites, which we've done, up in the atmosphere and actually measure the Earth's temperature, what it would be without greenhouse gases. And that temperature comes out to be negative 18 degrees Celsius. So negative 18 below zero. Now, that is a very cold planet. If we actually lived on a planet that was negative 18, we would have frozen ocean surfaces, we would have frozen land surfaces, we would not be here. So as it turns out, when you add greenhouse gases to the atmosphere, it traps enough energy to raise our temperature from a negative 18 to what the average is today, which is about positive 15. So about 33 degrees Celsius or about 60 degrees Fahrenheit of warming from greenhouse gases. And importantly, taking us from a frozen ball, in which it's very unlikely that a sophisticated life form like ours would be existing, to a planet that's actually a pretty nice place. So greenhouse gases make the planet habitable. So it's important to recognize that. Without them, we don't have a habitable planet. Our debate these days is, do we have too much of them? That is the debate that's happening these days. So if we add lots of greenhouse gases to the atmosphere, and we have, we'll talk about that, there will be more energy in the atmosphere, and by definition, climate will change. So this is not complicated physics. This is simply, you add more greenhouse gas to the atmosphere, you raise the amount of energy in the atmosphere, you raise the temperature of the planet. And keep in mind that without those greenhouse gases in the first place, you don't have a habitable planet. So this is what I call physical law limitation. I get asked a question like, do you believe in climate change? And I just kind of get my dander up when I hear that, because there's no belief here. This is like asking, do I believe in gravity? Right? No. Gravity is gravity, right? I don't believe in climate change. Climate change is climate change. Climate system is the climate system. It's physics. I don't get to believe in physics. I have to live with physics. All right. What you should know about timing. All right. So you live on a water planet. Right? So about 70% of the surface of the planet is water. A lot of water out there. Water takes a long time to heat up. Takes a long time to cool down. In my classrooms, I would give students a thought experiment, and it's important that this is a thought experiment. Take 2 pots out of the kitchen, identical pots, put them on the stove. In one of them, you pour a couple of cups of water, and the other one, you don't put any water. You turn the heat on exactly the same. So the same amount of energy is flowing into those 2 pots. Wait 2 minutes. Stick your finger into the pot with water, and it's just barely warm enough, right? Now, this is why it's a thought experiment. Take your finger and put it in the pot without the water. The sizzling sound you hear is the end of your finger burning. Same amount of energy went into both pots. So we know we have to conserve energy. So what's happening here is that water is absorbing the energy that's coming out of that gas stove. It takes a long time for water to warm up. It takes a long time for water to cool down. So what's happening in today's climate system is that the extra energy that's being trapped by extra greenhouse gases in the atmosphere is actually going to warm up the ocean. That's where most of it is going. And that's where it will continue to go over time. But it cuts the other way. So that's kind of good because it means the ocean's slowing down this process of a planet warming up. But it cuts the other way. So if we get our act together and we start to reduce greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, we've already warmed the ocean up. So it'll be a long time before the ocean cools back off. So what this means is that impacts come after causes by roughly 50 years to many centuries, which means you generate something called intergenerational equity, intergenerational issues. What we do to the planet, our kids and grandkids have to deal with. What they do to the planet, our great-grandkids and great-great-grandkids are going to have to deal with. So there's a problem here with cause and effect. We have benefited greatly from the fossil fuels that are available on this wonderful planet of ours. But the waste product of those fossil fuels are something that our kids and our grandkids are going to have to deal with. And there's a fairness factor in there that we have to try to understand. All right, this is my granddaughter, Amelia. She's a little bit more grown now, but I just love this picture. That's Baby Doll. I don't know why Baby Doll's upside down, but that's the way it works. And this is me on the right. Until one generation is willing to forego short-term gains for the long-term benefit of its children, we will not be able to address climate change. So until we actually change our time scale of interest, we're not going to be able to address this problem because you live on a planet that forces that kind of time scale issue. All right, continuing. Do you have time? Yeah, we have time. So what you're seeing here is a movie put together from satellite photographs of the ice in the Arctic Ocean. And what you see there is, first of all, it's circulating clockwise, so that ice is going off to the edge of Greenland. That happens every year. Ice in the Arctic Ocean builds up, some of it goes off, peeling down the eastern side of Greenland. That's where icebergs in the North Atlantic come from. That's what sank the Titanic. What made Leo DiCaprio famous. Totally convolved some things here. Anyway, so normally what happens in the Arctic is when ice is lost, other ice is formed. The whiter it is here, the thicker the ice is, and the more thicker it is, the more capable it is of resisting change. So one of the things that we are changing on our planet is that we're losing the old ice, and we're not replacing it because it's not cold enough to replace it with the more of the old ice. Now that's an important consideration because, you see here, this gets towards this side. You see what's happened now is there's still ice in the Arctic Ocean, but it's 1 year ice. It's less than a foot or two thick. That ice can go away pretty easily if you had a really unusually warm summer in the Arctic. And so that's what we call a trigger, a tipping point in the climate system. So this is something we're watching now. As a climate scientist, we're watching very carefully what happens in the Arctic Ocean. Because remember, I told you the three things that determine our climate, one of which is reflectivity. So when it's white ice up there in the summertime, it reflects that incoming sun. When it's blue ocean, it absorbs that. So it's a huge switch in terms of energy in the Arctic. So I just want you to keep an eye on this. Right? We all live in interesting times, right? But this is one thing to keep an eye on because this may be a harbinger of a change that would cause some pretty substantial changes in our climate system. All right, what you should know. So one of the things I do, I'm an ice core scientist, I drill ice cores, but I also work in Greenland and my lab works in Antarctica. And another thing that we don't talk enough about is the relationship between sea level and temperature on our planet. So this is just a graph. I'm not going to go into details. I'm just trying to show you that these three things, Earth's temperature in red, sea level in blue, and atmospheric CO2 in light blue, these three things are related very closely over time. This is time going back 800,000 years. What you see is glacial and glacial cycles. But there's a very strong relationship on our planet between how warm it is and how high sea level is, and how cold it is and how low sea level is. And that's because when it's cold, the ice sheets grow. They take water out of the ocean and they make more Antarctica and they make more Greenland and they make the Laurentide ice sheet and they but they cover Canada and make it impossible to have a decent hockey game. You know, all these things happen. And when it gets warmer, that land ice melts and goes back into the ocean. What we don't talk about enough is scale. How big are these things, okay? So I've replotted it here in a different way. Actually, Dave Archer replotted it. So what you see here is sea level in the x-axis and or y-axis, and global mean temperature in the x-axis. Global mean temperature. So 20,000 years ago, we had a glacial period. There was ice all over Canada. There was ice all over Scandinavia. The oceans were about 120 meters. Multiply by 3 if you want lower. Right? But it was about 6 degrees cold. And then 40 million years ago, it was so warm that all of Antarctica ice melted, all of Greenland's ice was melted. And the water from land ice was in the ocean, and this is what we call sort of the maximum sea level, plus or minus, because of continental configuration. But that's about 4 degrees warmer than today, or actually 4 degrees warmer than 1960. And it was about 80 meters of sea level rise. All right, so these are numbers that I want you to try to, digest. So 4 degrees warmer than the 1960s gives you 80 meters of sea level rise. 80 meters is multiplied by 3 is a lot of feet, right? It's a lot of feet. I'll show you some fun pictures here in a moment. But that's a lot of sea level rise. So on our planet, temperature change is not that big. So over the last 40 million years, we have about a 10 degrees C, what we call dynamic range of temperature. 6 degrees colder than today to make an ice age, 4 degrees warmer than today to melt all the ice. That yielded 200 meters of sea level change. So roughly every degree Celsius change in temperature, mean annual temperature, corresponds to roughly 20 meters of sea level change. Our world leaders today are arguing about whether or not 1.5 to 2 degrees is a safe thing. That's what the argument is about today. And what I want you to digest and understand is that that may seem fine right now, but eventually that dot that says IPCC forecast for year 2100, that dot will not stay where it is. It'll go back up to that dotted line, and sea level will rise by tens of meters. There is no time on the planet where that doesn't happen, because that relationship between it gets colder, ice forms, it gets warmer, ice melts. It's so simple in its physics that that's the way the system works. Okay. So, what does the future look like? We're already a degree warmer. We'll be more than that pretty soon. Sea level will rise. It will be slow, but it'll be steady. It just will keep happening. Expect several feet per century. It's kind of the pace anywhere between 3 to 5 feet, a couple of meters per century. It will take centuries for sea level to rise. It will not happen right away. Expect thresholds in the system. For example, when insurance is unavailable for your home, or when coastal roads or coastal infrastructure, pipelines, electricity, etc. These will be thresholds in the system where things will happen and we'll go, oh, we got to do something about this. One of the critical points that I'm working on as a climate scientist is, can this be reversed? Can this be stopped? And right now we don't know. We don't think so. We think the way these ice sheets work is once they get lubricated and start to flow into the ocean, there's not much going to stop them until they reach a new equilibrium, which will probably be somewhere in the neighborhood of 15 to 20 meters higher sea level than today. Not great news. But I'm going to end up with some great news. Hang with me. All right, so what does 13 meters of sea level look like? In other words, what are we committing, not our kids, but great-grandkids, great-great-grandkids, our future generations, what are we committing them to? This is Bangladesh, with 13 meters of sea level rise. This is really about political instability. This is about refugees. So there's going to be, somewhere down the road, not just tens of millions, but billions of people who are going to need to relocate. Because most of the world's population today lives near the coast. And the coast is not going to be available for them. So they're going to have to figure out how this works. Right now we have hundreds of thousands of refugees, and we struggle with that. Imagine, hundreds of millions of refugees. That's what, that in my opinion, people ask me, can we wipe out life on the earth by climate change? The answer is no. Our planet has been much warmer in the past. Our planet has been much colder in the past. Life has persisted on this planet. Will we make the lives of our children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren much more difficult? Yes. That's the key. This is what Florida in the south, deep south, looks like with 20 meters of sea level rise. I like to show this picture for a couple of reasons. One is Orlando survives. Right? So if you're a fan of the current debate over Disney World versus Disney World survives. Whether you like that or not, I'm not going to delve into it, but Disney World does. I get depressed because I'm a huge fan of Cajun cooking, and it's gone. Right? So it's got to go someplace else. But that I won't go there. This is one of my. So this is probably the only thing you'll remember from this talk. But the peninsula here that is underwater now is what? Delaware, Maryland. It's the Delmarva Peninsula. All right. Second question, class. What's the first state to sign on and say we want to be part of the United States? Delaware. It's on their license plate. They're extraordinarily proud of that. As it turns out, the first state, which will no longer be a state, is Delaware. So when I tell people, you want to remember as sea level rises, what I call a big sea level rise, all you have to do is remember, first in, first out. I've actually had people come up to me in restaurants in the middle of nowhere, lean over and go, FIFO, and walk away. So I guarantee you're going to remember that. All right. So I want to end up on three things. So I get asked a lot, what can we do? Yes, you can watch your energy consumption. All the what I call the little things. You can vote. There's a lot of things you can do. But in the end, a lot of this is about change in us, fundamental change in us as a species, as human beings, in order for us to live sustainably on the planet. So, show the kids some love is thought number one. Okay? Show the kids some love means we got to think more about 50 years from now, 100 years from now, 200 years from now. Change our time scale of interest. That's going to be important. The second thing I want to share with you is we have to get back to showing the poorest of the world some love. I know this is what you folks do. So this is important because we share the atmosphere. And it doesn't matter if we quit burning fossil fuels, but China continues to do it, or Africa continues to do it, we share the atmosphere. There continue to be greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. You gotta have global cooperation on this, which means we have to think as a species. We have to reach out to those folks who currently don't have the money, the economic resources to do what they would like to do to deal with this problem. So show the poorest of the world, right? I've used this slide for about 30 years, right? You have to control population, and control population, particularly on this planet, you've got to end male domination. Never fails to get one piece of the pie. What I mean by that is very simply, in the poorest parts of the world, women have no value economically, they have no value politically, their value is in children. And when you have that situation, you have an increasing population. As women have value economically, like in our society, as they have value politically, now are they equal right now? No. No, they're not. But as that increases, very clearly the number of children born to a woman goes down in numbers, and they tend to have those children later in life. Those are things that naturally control population. Now, China tried it a different way, it did not work. Right? The draconian approach to population control does not work. What works is equity. What works is sharing. What works is having, us sharing the economic benefits and the political benefits. All right. I'll stop there.
Wow.
And the factor of 50 years down the road, we're doomed.
Huh? What was that now?
Say if you, the last comments you made, the last point you made about women, and the 50-year horizon before things start happening, we're doomed, right? I mean, population is not going to slow down enough.
Well,
you can say better than I can. All right, so one problem is that there's a 50-year horizon on anything we do today, and the other is that the major factor in this is women's power and how that affects population growth. And with that, it seems to me we're doomed.
I would agree with you up to the point where we're doomed. And the reason why I say that is that keep in mind that climate change is disruptive, climate change is expensive, climate change is going to cost a lot of money, but it's not going to destroy us. Yes, we're going to have to put up with a lot of trouble over climate change, but there's at no point along the way are we locked out of saying it's all over with, give it up. Right? At any point along the way, we take action, we can slow this down, we can reverse, we can change it.
I'm just thinking of as far as our history of making changes like that, whether it's women or other things that are kind of societal, and
it does take time. So one of the things we have to do is figure out how to act more quickly than we have in the past. One of the examples I give is, we knew that smoking cigarettes caused health problems. It took us 40 years just to get a warning on a pack of cigarettes.
The question I have is, you were talking about the 4-degree increase. Is that in atmospheric temperature, earth temperature, or does it matter? The reason I'm asking is human survival in these temperatures. You said we won't be destroyed, but how do you live in 120 degrees without air conditioning?
Okay, the question is, if we go up to say 4 degrees in temperature, how can we live on such a hot planet, basically? So the answer to your first question is it's mean annual global temperature. So it's the average temperature of the Earth-ocean system. Yes, 40 million years ago, it was hard to live anywhere near the equator because it was very hot. Plants grew like crazy, but species, particularly mammals, found it difficult. Now, if you're a reptile, you're a dinosaur, it was not so bad. So mammals moved farther north. So yes, I mean, basically if we get to that point where the planet is that warm, that's an even bigger problem of what do you do with all the people? They got to move north. Sir.
Yes. So I noticed in your chart, I will tell you I might be wrong, about 120,000 years ago there were 400 parts per million. That was the last time, is that correct? Somewhere around there?
Yes, it was, it's about, actually, yeah.
Okay, so that being said, I know that this is what you studied with cores and looking at this and the causation, I'm assuming volcanic, whatever at that time. What is our data confidence today that this is human caused versus natural causation?
Great question. We have many ways actually today that we can determine that. One is if you just add up the total amount of coal, oil, and natural gas that we burned and put in the atmosphere, it exceeds the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere by roughly a factor of 2, which is how we understand the carbon. You put 2 units in the atmosphere, one of them's going to go in the ocean. Right? So simple math is one answer to that. Another answer to that is I measure in my lab something called carbon-13, which is a stable isotope of CO2. Using CO2 and the isotopes of CO2, I can tell you this is how much coal, oil, and natural gas we had in the atmosphere.
From the signature of...
Right. Now the other thing we can do is we can measure something called carbon-14, which is a radioactive form of carbon. Fossil fuels are so old they don't have any carbon-14. So when we measure carbon-14 of CO2 in the atmosphere, we can very directly calculate this is how much fossil fuels. As a matter of fact, we have been trying for a long time to get the federal government to fund us to be the CO2 cops, so to speak, where we would take air samples downwind of China and downwind of India, etc., and verify their claims of how much fossil fuels they're burning. Because frankly, I don't think they're telling the truth.
I would agree.
Yeah.
The 40 million years ago, when it was so warm.
Yeah.
Just explain that to us, because there weren't any fossil fuels being used.
Right. All right. So how do you get CO2 levels higher 40 million years ago without human beings around to burn all this stuff? Right. We're not the only agent of change in the carbon cycle. Right? So most of the carbon on the planet today is in the form of rocks, carbonates, limestones, etc. So one of the ways in which CO2 varies naturally on the planet over long periods of time is how much of that rock-based carbon gets eroded into the atmosphere to put CO2 up in the atmosphere. So CO2 levels have been 1,000 parts per million in the past, higher than 1,000 parts per million in the past. When we had a robust carbon cycle that was pumping CO2 up into the atmosphere naturally. We don't live in that atmosphere today. It'd be very hot, back to your question. But yes, the carbon cycle is naturally capable of putting a lot of CO2 up in the atmosphere. Interestingly, it doesn't drop much below 180 parts per million. So if you looked at that CO2 graph I showed you, this is one of the things that I find completely fascinating. I lost it. One of the things I find completely fascinating about our planet is that CO2 doesn't drop below a certain level. If you go much below that level, plants can't photosynthesize very effectively. So there's some break in the system that allows plants to exist, continue to exist on this planet. All right, so we've never gotten so hot that the oceans have boiled, we've never gotten so cold that photosynthesis can't occur. And we should all be thankful. Yeah.
Make the case, if you will, that this change is inevitable and that we will lose this war.
Make the case that the change is inevitable, we will lose this war. So we've already put a lot of CO2 in the atmosphere. So we're at 400 something parts per million. The last time it was 400 something parts per million was about 5 million years ago. The planet was a couple of degrees warmer. So if we do nothing, thank you, Jim, the planet will continue to warm up, water will continue to melt, etc. Now here's where it gets interesting. We put CO2 in the atmosphere, we can take it back out of the atmosphere. We have the technology to do that. It's expensive, but we can do it. If we wanted to stop this, what we got to do is figure out, I want to take large quantities of CO2 back out of the atmosphere and bring the thermostat back down. So it's not inevitable. There is some heating that's already built into the system, because I told you the oceans have warmed up a little bit. But the big warming is not inevitable because we have the technology to actually reverse this, if we wanted to employ that technology. Okay? Yeah.
Isn't there a natural technology that exists called biomass trees?
Trees, yeah.
So what about simply rewilding places? I mean, this has been talked about quite a bit, about simply demarcating large sections of rainforest as simply optimistic.
Well, two things. One is, if you compare the amount of carbon in fossil fuels to the amount of carbon in living biomass on the planet, there's about 3 times more carbon in fossil fuels than there is in biomass. So you gotta rent a couple more planets and grow. Now, so it's a scale problem. But it's also, we're very actively trying to cut down all the trees on the planet. Right? We're working hard at that. So we're actually going in the wrong direction. The book has come out.
Maybe one more question.
One more question.
All right. All right, so your research is really impressive. But you have another big role in your bio. You're dean of 19,000 young kids. You talked about this as a global problem. What are we doing with these kids at UNC so that they might impact and create change?
We are educating world changers at UNC. They're getting the best education you can get on the planet right now. And they are smart. They understand these problems. And I can tell you that one of the most heartening things I can tell you is when I talk to the students today, one of the first things they will tell me is that they want to fix things. They want to change the world. They're not apathetic at all. They want to get at it. And that gives me great hope. Because we need them to step in, grapple with very difficult problems, and solve those very difficult problems. And what I hear from them is they've got a real appetite. So what we need to do is keep educating those kids, keep giving them, all the background, all the education we can, teach them how to talk to each other, teach them how to get over their differences and what we see today in our society, teach them how to do all that stuff, and I think we'll get there. I'm a huge fan of human beings, and I'm a diehard optimist.
Thank you so much, Jim. Very compelling and very interesting presentation. Appreciate your time. Everyone have a wonderful weekend. Remember, no meeting next week. We'll see you in June. Patrick.